16,000 years old civilization that rarely anyone talks about. Not China, not India, not Sumer or Egypt, and definitely not Göbekli Tepe. It's far to the east, in the land of the rising sun, Japan. And yes, it has been dated to 14,000 BCE. The Jomon culture, a civilization that lasted for nearly 14,000 years, longer than any known civilization in history. They created the oldest pottery in the world, yet they were hunter-gatherers. That makes no sense. And here's where it gets even stranger. The Jomon lived during and after the Younger Dryas, the mysterious global catastrophe that wiped out entire civilizations. Were they survivors of this event, or were they the last remnants of something even older? Something we were never meant to uncover. Why does mainstream history ignore them? And what secrets are hidden in the Jomon legacy? Mainstream history says, nah, just some hunter-gatherers making fancy pots. But when was the last time you saw nomadic tribes casually inventing the world's oldest pottery, while everyone else was still figuring out fire pits? At this point, even historians must be thinking, maybe they had YouTube tutorials? And if they did, I guarantee they hit subscribe faster than you just did. Look, you could trust the mainstream version that brushes this off. Or you could subscribe now and join the site that actually questions things. Because let's be honest, YouTube will probably recommend a cooking video next. And while that's great, it won't tell you if an ancient civilization was hiding lost knowledge. So go on, hit subscribe before the information mysteriously disappears like half of ancient history. Now let's talk about what happened 12,900 years ago. The catastrophe that should have wiped the Jomon out, but didn't. The Earth, recovering from the last ice age, was suddenly thrown into chaos. The Younger Dryas, a sudden and extreme cooling event. In just a few decades, temperatures dropped drastically. Glaciers that had begun to retreat surged forward again. Megafauna vanished. Entire civilizations disappeared. But the Jomon, they survived, not just for a few centuries, but for thousands of years. How? How did a civilization of hunter-gatherers thrive through an event that wiped out nearly everything else? Did they possess survival knowledge lost to time? Or were they remnants of something even older? Something that had already learned to adapt. One explanation is Japan's geography itself. During the Younger Dryas, much of the world faced food shortages and environmental collapse. But Japan's rugged mountains and vast forests may have offered shelters from extreme climate shifts. In times of crisis, people tend to seek higher grounds, caves, and enclosed valleys, places where microclimates could have allowed survival. And in Japan, we see something interesting. Jomon sites are often found in regions rich in caves and natural rock shelters. Another theory suggests the Jomon weren't just surviving, they were adapting. Japan's coastal locations may have provided an escape route. As sea levels fluctuated, they could have relied on marine resources like fishing, shellfish gathering, and deep sea foraging. And here's where it gets fascinating. Researchers have found evidence that the Jomon people may have used advanced seafaring techniques. Did the knowledge of the ocean allow them to move to a safer region when the world was collapsing? But what if they weren't just lucky survivors? What if they were carrying forward knowledge from something even older? Mainstream history tells us that the Jomon developed independently. But their pottery, their survival strategies, their ability to persist for over 14,000 years without being wiped out, that doesn't sound like a civilization that was just figuring things out. That sounds like a civilization that already knew what to do. If the Jomon didn't collapse, does that mean the knowledge came from an even older lost civilization? A civilization that mainstream history refuses to acknowledge. What were the Jomons really protecting? Pottery is one of the greatest markers of civilization. It signals stability, settlement, and planning. But in every known culture, pottery appears after agriculture. Once people began growing food, they need storage. Storage required permanent settlements, and permanent settlements led to the birth of civilization. Yet, the Jomon break this pattern entirely. At the Odai Yamamoto 1 site, archaeologists uncovered fragments of pottery dating back to 14,500 BCE. This is not only the earliest pottery in Japan, it is the oldest pottery ever discovered on Earth. The Jomon were making ceramic vessels at a time when most of the world was still living as nomadic hunter-gatherers. At least that's what mainstream history tells us. This discovery challenges everything we assume about the origins of complex society. But why is this a problem for mainstream history? Pottery is fragile. It's heavy. It breaks easily. It is not something practical for nomadic groups moving from place to place. For this reason, historians have always associated pottery with agriculture-based societies. Settled people who had permanent homes, surplus food, and the time to develop craftsmanship. Yet, the Jomon, who are classified as hunter-gatherers, had no known large-scale agriculture. They didn't build massive cities. They didn't create irrigation systems like the Indus Valley or Sumerians. So why were they making highly advanced pottery thousands of years before agriculture even appeared in Japan? Unlike the early potteries of Mesopotamia or Egypt, which was mostly utilitarian, Jomon pottery was highly decorative. They weren't just simple storage containers. They were works of art. Many Jomon pots feature intricate design, flame-like patterns, and elaborate textures. Some even resemble symbols found in later civilizations. This raises a crucial question. Was Jomon pottery just for storage, or did it serve a deeper purpose? Spiritual, ritualistic, or even technological? The level of craftsmanship in early Jomon pottery suggests that it did not emerge suddenly. Skills like this take generations, sometimes centuries, to perfect. This leaves us with three possibilities. This would mean that pottery didn't originate with them, but was legacy of an earlier, unknown civilization that had already mastered ceramic before the Younger Dryas. Recent studies suggest that early humans may have practiced forest gardening, a method of growing and managing plants in natural landscape rather than in cleared farmlands. This would mean the Jomon were not purely hunter-gatherers, but had a stable food system that supported long-term settlements. If the Jomon people survived the Younger Dryas, could they have inherited pottery techniques from a more advanced civilization that existed before the global flood? One that was wiped out, leaving behind only fragments of knowledge. Jomon pottery forces us to rethink our understanding of civilization. If they developed complex ceramic without agriculture, what else did they know? What other assumptions about early humans we have gotten wrong? And most importantly, was pottery their only advancement, or just the first piece of a much larger puzzle? Throughout history, civilizations have left behind artifacts that reflect their beliefs, their myths, and sometimes their encounters. But few are as strange as the Dogū figurines. Found across Japan and dated between 10,000 BCE to 2000 BCE, these small clay figures are among the most puzzling artifacts of ancient world. At first glance, they appear humans, but the closer you look, the stranger they become. Unlike other human-like figurines from ancient cultures, the Dogū have exaggerated, almost unnatural features. Large almond-shaped eyes, elongated limbs, and sometimes what appears to be a helmet or goggles. Many of them have intricate carvings resembling tubing, armor, or even mechanical suits. Some are seated in positions that resemble control panels or operating devices. To mainstream archaeology, these figurines are purely spiritual or ritualistic, representing fertility goddesses or shamans. But to others, the Dogū raises a much bigger question. Were the Jomon depicting something they actually saw? Some researchers argue that the Dogū figurine do not represent humans at all. Instead, they may depict non-human entities. beings who once interacted with the Jomon culture. In the ancient astronaut theory, these figures are seen as evidence of contact with advanced beings, either extraterrestrial or highly sophisticated pre-human civilization. Their resemblance to figures seen in other cultures only deepens the mystery. This is not the first time that ancient cultures have created statues with unusual non-human features. The Olmecs of Mesoamerica carved colossal stone heads with features that don't match the local population. Some theories suggest outsiders or even beings from other places. Sumerian carvings depict the Anunnaki, beings with elongated skulls and unusual eye shapes, said to have come from the stars. Egyptian gods were often depicted with animal-human hybrid features, raising speculations about whether they were representing metaphors or something real. The Jomon Dogū Figurines fit into this global pattern. Ancient people creating images of beings that don't fit within the human form. These figurines are simply religious artifacts, representation of spirits, ancestors, or deities. But if the Jomon had encountered something beyond human understanding, how would they have recorded it? Would they have written it down? Or would they have done exactly what they did, immortalizing it in clay in a form that would outlast even their own civilization? Could these figures hint at an unknown connection with other ancient civilizations? And if so, what exactly were the Jomon trying to tell us? The Jomon were isolated, or so we are told, a civilization locked within the islands of Japan, developing independently for thousands of years. But as we dig deeper, a different picture begins to emerge, one that suggests they may have been part of something much bigger. Because across the world, echoes of the Jomon can be found in artwork, in symbols, even in genetics, and perhaps in lost cities hidden beneath the ocean. Thousands of kilometers apart, no known contact, and yet the Jomon and the builders of Göbekli Tepe share an unusual connection. Both civilizations existed right after the Younger Dryas, a time of global catastrophe when most of the ancient world was collapsing. Yet, instead of fading away, these two cultures thrived. Göbekli Tepe was built by hunter-gatherers, defying conventional wisdom, right? The Jomons too were hunter-gatherers, yet they built permanent settlements, pottery, and advanced spiritual structures. Both societies left behind symbolic artwork, suggesting a deep connection to spirituality, lost knowledge, or something even more mysterious. Is it possible that the Jomon and the builders of Göbekli Tepe shared a common ancestry? Could they have been two surviving branches of an even older civilization, one that was nearly wiped out at the end of the Ice Age? The Jomon were not completely isolated. Genetic studies reveal unexpected links between Jomon DNA and ancient population in Siberia and Korea. And here's where it gets even stranger. The Ainu people, considered direct descendants of the Jomon, shared genetic similarities with some Native American tribes. Could this suggest an ancient migration route across the Pacific? Did the Jomon or their ancestors travel further than we ever imagined? We know that early humans reached the Americas through Siberia. But what if there was another route, one that started in the Pacific and left behind traces in Japan, Polynesia, and beyond? Deep beneath the waves, off the coast of Yonaguni, Japan, lies something that shouldn't exist. Massive stone terraces, broad staircases, precise right angles. A formation so structured, so symmetrical, that it almost looks engineered. This is the Yonaguni Monument, discovered in 1986. And to this day, it remains one of the most controversial underwater sites in history. Mainstream archaeologists argue that this is nothing more than a natural rock formation, an illusion created by ocean currents and thousands of years of erosion. But let's take a closer look. Yonaguni features multiple stepped platforms, narrow passageways, and a pyramid-like structure with flat terraces. Details that are difficult to explain as purely natural. The formation also has a large, evenly spaced holes in certain sections, resembling pillars or supports, Even more baffling, some areas appear to have tool marks, sign of possible human modification. If that's true, then we are looking at a site that was built before it was swallowed by the ocean. If this structure was indeed man-made, the next question is, who built it? If the monuments date back to at least 10,000 BCE, that place is right within the Jomon timeline. But here's the problem. The Jomon were not supposed to have advanced architecture or large-scale constructions. So if they didn't build Yonaguni, then who did? One possibility is that Yonaguni wasn't built by Jomon, but rather by an earlier civilization that predated them. At the end of the Ice Age, global levels rose by over 120 meters, flooding coastal settlements around the world. Could Yonaguni be a relic from one of these lost civilizations, one that disappeared beneath the waves, leaving behind only the stone structure? If that's the case, then we are not just looking at an underwater ruin, we are looking at evidence that an entire chapter of human history has been erased. Was Yonaguni once part of a lost civilization that mainstream history refuses to acknowledge? If we piece these fragments together, a connection to Göbekli Tepe, unexplained genetic links, and the mystery of Yonaguni, it all suggests one thing. The Jomon were not an isolated anomaly. They were part of something bigger, a civilization or network of civilizations that mainstream history has just overlooked. And if that's true, how many more lost civilizations are waiting to be uncovered? Could the Jomon be the missing link in humanity's lost ancient past? We have uncovered a civilization that doesn't fit the need boxes of mainstream history, a civilization that defied every rule we thought we understood. The Jomon created the oldest stone pottery in the world, yet they were supposed to be hunter-gatherers. They survived the Younger Dryas, while other cultures vanished. They left behind mysterious figurines that looked nothing like the humans of their time, and they might have had connections stretching far beyond Japan. So what does history tell us about them? What mainstream history say, the Jomon were just primitive hunter-gatherers. Their pottery was an accident, nothing advanced. The Dogū figurines are just religious artifacts, nothing more. But does that explanation really hold up? What the evidence suggests, the Jomon might have been preserving knowledge from a much older civilization. Their technological advancements from pottery to seafaring doesn't fit their supposed timeline. They may have had contact with other cultures across the Pacific, Siberia, or even beyond. If we look at the bigger picture, one thing becomes clear. The Jomon were not an anomaly. They were not an isolated primitive tribe. They were part of something much larger, something we don't fully understand. So we have to ask, could the Jomon be the last known remnants of a far older, advanced civilization lost to time? If you want more deep investigative history videos, check out our video on a city that disappeared in a day. Subscribe for more hidden forbidden knowledge and historical mysteries, because history is far stranger than we have been told, and we have only just begun uncovering the truth.